The origin of Thelma Louise begins not in Hollywood, but in the mind of a then unknown writer, Callie Khouri, a former music video production assistant. Disillusioned by the shallow portrayals of women in mainstream films, Khouri decided to write something radical, a movie about two women who take their lives into their own hands. She wanted to flip the traditional outlaw road movie on its head, infusing it with a raw feminist voice. Khouri wrote the screenplay in 6 months and refused to dilute its message. She originally planned to direct the film herself, but the studios were reluctant to entrust a high-profile debut to a first-time director. But a debut would be a first-time director. That's what debut means. Both women are in unhappy relationships, as Thelma is married to a controlling carpet salesman turned professional golfer called Daryl, played by Shooter McGavin, whilst Louise has hooked up with a musician called Jimmy, played by Michael Madsen, who is constantly touring and is never around, depending on what mood she's in. But after Louise shoots and kills a man who tries to free Thelma, they end up having to go on the run from the law together, all while being pursued by the police.
Won't work.
The script was then passed around Hollywood, but failed to gain much interest due to its overtly feminist themes. The script found its way to Mimi Polk Gitlin and Ridley Scott, who had just finished producing Black Rain and Someone to Watch Over Me. The likes of Richard Donner and Kevin Reynolds were asked to direct, with Scott only acting as a producer. But after they all failed to grasp his vision for the movie, he bit the bullet and stepped into the director's chair himself. Finding the right Thelma and Louise proved to be the film's first major challenge. Susan Sarandon, already an established and respected actress, was immediately drawn to the role of the tough, no-nonsense waitress with a traumatic past. She brought emotional gravity and moral conviction to the character and reportedly took full ownership of Louise's arc, even helping fine-tune key emotional moments. The part of Thelma, a naive housewife who evolves into an empowered fugitive, cycled through many high-profile names including Michelle Pfeiffer, Meryl Streep and Jodie Foster, but it was Geena Davis, fresh off The Accidental Tourist and Beetlejuice, who lobbied hard for the part. Davis sent Ridley Scott daily messages via his assistant to keep herself in the running, eventually with her persistence paying off. Khouri said that watching Sarandon and Davis transform into their characters was like watching the script come to life in real time. A then unknown Brad Pitt won the role of JD, the charming drifter who seduces Thelma and robs her blind, a role that launched him into instant stardom. Interestingly, Billy Baldwin was originally cast but dropped out last minute. Pitt, cast over several better known actors, had only $6,000 in the bank when he auditioned. George Clooney had auditioned 5 times for JD and later said that's the one that got away. Ridley Scott immediately asked Harvey Keitel to play Hal, a sympathetic cop who's pursuing both women and trying to reach them emotionally, after he loved working with him on the Duelists. Filming began in Utah and California in 1990. The production faced grueling desert heat, dust storms and logistical challenges typical of a road movie. Most of the film was shot on location, with the vast American Southwest serving as both a stunning visual metaphor and a looming lawless frontier. Sarandon and Davis both contributed to the character's growth. The famous final kiss between the two women wasn't in the script. Sarandon spontaneously suggested it during filming. Released in May 1991, Thelma and Louise was marketed initially as a buddy film or quirky crime story, but what audiences got was far more incendiary. Grossing over $45 million domestically on a $16.5 million budget, Roger Ebert called it a lot more than a crime spree. It's an awakening. It was praised for its sharp writing, performances and feminist themes, winning Best Original Screenplay and being nominated for 5 other Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Actress for both of the leads and Best Director, making Khouri one of the few solo women to win an Oscar for screenwriting at the time. However, the movie also got a lot of criticism for those who believed it to be anti-male, claiming that the film depicted its male characters in an unfairly negative way. However, Callie Khouri dismissed these claims as being a double standard, pointing out that similar behaviour in male-centered road trip movies have not received a similar level of backlash. Very valid point.
Exactly.
She also pointed out that the claim that the film had no positive male characters was simply untrue, as Hal is shown to be sympathetic to the women's plight and wants to reach them rather than punish them. Janet Maslin, who wrote a glowing review of the movie, also dismissed these criticisms, saying, "People are simply offended that the men in this story don't really matter. They are treated as figures in the landscape through which these characters pass, and as such they are essentially powerless. For male characters perhaps this is a novelty, but women in road movies have always been treated in precisely the same way."
Okay, if you say so.
And you bet they get the obvious joke in there somewhere.
Jeez Louise.
While it is definitely a feminist movie, I don't think it ever overdoes it. I mean, granted, the first time we see Shooter McGavin, they do everything in their power to portray him as an asshole. She laughs about how she ditched him and how unhappy she is, but yet you're still with him because... Louise.
Why don't you just tell him to get lost once and for all?
Why don't you ditch that no-good husband of yours?
I mean, once she's reported missing, she calls him in a panic, but he's too preoccupied watching a football game. Although it is weird that Thelma is a married woman and happily dances with a good-looking dude who hits on her. Is this empowerment? I mean, I know that he's a douchebag, but I'm just saying end the relationship first. Yeah, you go, girl. Nearly cheat on your husband. Woo! But it turns out to be a and beats the hell out of her. But here's a question. Why are women allowed to perv on men, but when we do it, we're pigs?
Did you see his butt? Daryl don't have a cute butt.
He doesn't even have an ass. Why am I analysing Brad Pitt's ass? Always nice to see him topless though. Madsen seems like a decent guy at first, sending his girlfriend money without any questions before getting angry and wrecking the place. And they constantly run into a perverted lorry driver who makes inappropriate gestures towards them. But other than that, it never feels like it's rammed down our throats though. You can tell that Hal is somewhat conflicted. It's a great performance by Keitel as he's sympathetic towards the duo and wants to help them but also needs to do his job and do it right. The cops constantly want to go in all guns a-blazing, but it's Hal who tries to step in as he's making progress in emotionally reaching Louise. He even risks his own life and runs towards them in the end in front of all of the rifle-slinging cops. The two leads are great. At the start you can see that Thelma is in such a restricted relationship and just needs to let loose. Which is certainly what her character does. She goes on a hell of a journey throughout the film. The rear scene is obviously hard to watch, but it's such an epic moment as Louise makes the save with the gun. It's heavily implied throughout the movie that she is a real victim herself, and you get the impression in this scene as her voice breaks as she gives the rear a piece of her mind. And you expect her to be able to move on and let it go, so it comes right the hell out of nowhere when she comes back and shoots the prick into oblivion. You really don't see it coming. The movie is also a heartbreaking commentary on assault victims, with a really important message on how society treats them.
I think we ought to tell the police.
Tell him what, Thelma? Just what do you think we should tell him, huh? Just about 100 goddamn people saw you dancing cheek to cheek with him all night. Who's gonna believe that? That we don't live in that kind of a world, Thelma?
If you hadn't come out when you did, he would have hurt me a lot worse. And probably nothing would have happened to him, because everybody did see me dancing with him all night. They would have made out like I'd asked for it.
And sadly, this is all far too accurate. The performances are spectacular as the panic begins to set in and they're trying to figure out what just happened and what to do next. Although Louise does briefly blame Thelma for this.
If you weren't concerned with having so much fun, we wouldn't be here right now.
Screw you! Give her a hug, goddammit! It's weird that the waitress gets questioned and she rules out Thelma or Louise being a killer, but not once does she mention that the dude was a creep, which she acknowledges earlier in the film.
Harlan, you bothering these poor girls?
Hell no, I was just being friendly.
Well, it's a good thing they're not all as friendly as you.
So why is a self-defense killing not on the table? This is never mentioned by the cops or even considered. In fact, wouldn't his jeans be pulled down and unzipped? Although it is very strange that considering what just happened not long ago, Thelma still meets Brad Pitt and wants to give him a lift. Dude, you still trust men after that? Then again, the movie does make a point that she trusts people far too easily, so it does kind of make sense. Brad Pitt is great in this. He's so overly polite when we first meet him, so you expect him to be the exception and be a good guy. Yeah, hashtag not all men! They end up not giving him a lift before bumping into him again because this is the world's smallest area, I guess, considering they also bump into the same lorry driver multiple times. But Thelma continues hitting on a guy despite being married. Though technically she does tell her husband.
Go yourself.
But the way she refers to her husband to Brad Pitt still seems like they're together. Just end the relationship first, that's all I'm saying. It is quite amusing that these two ladies murdered a man not long ago and then just drive along belting out songs in the car as if nothing has happened. Although admittedly, Madsen does give the worst and most half-assed proposal in movie history. I think what makes it that more heartbreaking is that Brad Pitt does come across as extremely likeable, and it's great to see Thelma finally be happy. Although this edit is really weird. Watch this. Tell me that doesn't look like Louise is sat there watching Thelma make out with Brad Pitt. I wasn't exaggerating either. Louise has an argument with Madsen. He's clearly a violent douchebag and then we're supposed to root for them again? But Thelma is adorable when she's so overly happy the next morning after getting laid, which is what makes it so tragic when they realise he's robbed them. The poor girls can't catch a break. But it's okay because Thelma robs the store for some money. This is when her character really flies off the handles and initially it's hilarious.
Y'all lie down on the floor, please, right away. You too? Ma'am, would you get down? Not you, sir. Let's see who'll win a prize for keeping their cool. Sir, would you do the honors? Take all the cash out of that drawer, put it in a paper bag.
Yes, ma'am.
You're gonna have an amazing story to tell all your friends.
We see Brad Pitt again as he gets brought in for questioning, but now he's a lot more smug. He's so funny as he deliberately winds up the cops, then he brags to Shooter McGavin about shagging Thelma. He's having an absolute blast. The weird thing is, Hal personally blames Pitt for Thelma robbing the store because he took all of their money, but from their point of view, these women are cold-blooded murderers, so where the hell's the excuse for that one? But it's okay, we can joke about murder.
Suck my dick.
I mean, it did deserve it. It's also never played for laughs, but it is kind of funny how the situation just keeps getting worse and worse. So Thelma gets rescued and they kill a man in self-defense, but then they treat Louise's boyfriend and come and bring them a crap ton of money, but then they meet a douchebag who steals their money, so then they have to rob a store, but then they get pulled over by the police, so they take him hostage and lock him in the boot of their car. And the funny thing is, it's innocent little Thelma doing all of these. Look, even Louise can't believe the monster she's created. It's so dark, he begs and cries for his family, and Thelma still doesn't care. They take his beer and glasses, chuck his keys away, and it's a good thing nobody else drives past during all of this. In fact, 14 minutes of the movie's runtime go by before anyone discovers him, and he somehow knows where the keys are, despite them throwing away before locking him inside. And this dude is more of a psychopath than the women trying to asphyxiate the poor guy. Look, I know the lorry driver was a creep on the street and everything, but he goes to leave and they decide to blow his truck up. Calm down, guys.
For armed robbery, kidnapping a law enforcement officer.
The cop in the car hasn't been discovered yet, so how do they know about that? It really is an intense game of cat and mouse, but in reality, they only give up their whereabouts here because they drove over a fence. If they just carried on driving down the road normally, nobody would have noticed anything. But as the final car chase begins, it gets so tense. They do manage to get away, and then there's an uneasy silence in the car. It's like they didn't expect to actually get out of there. They were fully expecting to either be killed or apprehended. But also, it could be a sense of realization of just how insane things have gotten when they never should have. There's an incredible shot of them calmly driving alongside the cliff top before we subtly and slowly see a police chopper creep around the corner in their pursuit. And have a jump scare for the reveal. This is one of my favourite endings to a movie ever. It is so surreal. They get surrounded by cop cars and now they have nowhere else to go. That's the thing, on the surface, this is a really miserably depressing ending. They're on a cliff and have nowhere else to go, but at least they're in it together until the very end. They decide to not give up, they hold hands and they drive off the cliff. The decision to have the women drive off the cliff rather than showing the crash was a deliberate creative choice. Scott wanted to preserve their final moment of agency and freeze them mid-liberation. The final freeze frame was Ridley Scott's idea, added in post-production. It became one of the most iconic endings in modern film. It's somewhat endearing and uplifting despite it being a double suicide. It's a fantastic ending to an incredible movie about female companionship. Most women can relate to being screwed over by guys, and this is a story about that camaraderie between two best friends. I never felt like the feminism was forced down our throats like other movies. I think it's just a tragic film about tragic events that sadly a lot of women do go through. It's a phenomenal piece of cinema, and honestly, one of the best I have seen in the 1001 so far. At its core, Thelma and Louise was a feminist manifesto disguised as a road movie. It stirred fierce debates upon release. Some called it empowering, others accused it of promoting violence against men. Feminist scholars hailed it as a watershed moment in female representation, highlighting autonomy, trauma, and friendship in a way Hollywood rarely had. The film's jump off the cliff ending became symbolic of liberation through defiance. It inspired generations of female-led road movies and crime dramas. It launched Brad Pitt's career, and it remains a cultural touchstone in debates about gender in film. In later interviews, Geena Davis and Susan Sarandon said that they had no idea the movie would be so impactful. More than 30 years after its release, it is still more than just a movie. It's a cultural rebellion on wheels, a celebration of friendship, resistance, and self-determination. From Khouri's bold script to Scott's sweeping direction and the searing performances of Davis and Sarandon, the film dared to ask, what happens when women stop waiting to be saved and save themselves? For any viewer revisiting Thelma and Louise today, it's not just a film to be admired, it's a film that demands to be felt.